we're rebelling, or we're choosing to rebel on the land of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation in Naarm, or Melbourne. We'd like to acknowledge that we're standing on land that's never been ceded. It was stolen by the first white colonisers, and that oppression continues till today. We cannot have any show of having climate justice without justice for First Nations Australians. We have so much to learn from the ancient wisdom that they accumulated over living in this country peacefully for millennia before it was stolen from them. We pay tribute to the elders, past, present, and those that earn that great honour in the future. Today, we're here to protest against the aviation industry. They have a conference today deciding on who gets what slot at an airport. They're carrying on in there. There's 1,000 people from all over the planet carrying on in there today as if it's business as usual, as if they have no responsibility at all for the climate crisis that we're all experiencing right now. Not all that far from where we are standing. There was just a notice that came up that a town in New South Wales, not all that far away from here, is being evacuated right now. There are over 30 million people in Pakistan that don't have their homes anymore. Their livelihoods have been destroyed. These people in here have to take responsibility for that. They're one of the major causes. The aviation industry is one of the major causes of that. So people all over the planet are saying right now, we refuse consent. So let's us say that.
We refuse consent.
And we'll keep refusing consent until some sanity prevails. Right? There were people in there that were embarrassed that we were here with this banner. They didn't want us to show that, to unfurl the banner. But we have a right to do that, and we will keep doing it. And one more time, we refuse consent.
Climate crisis. Stop the slots. Okay, let's hear from Mark Carter a bit more about what IATA are doing.
How you going, mate?
Thanks, Tony. In the middle of the climate crisis, we're here today to picket to IATA's slot machine gamble. We're here to protest the aviation, airport and airlines fossil fuel industries emissions expansion plans, and to publicise aviation's contribution to the climate emergency. Right now, flying is the most warming single thing you can do. It's 3 times more warming than the industry admits, and their plans have them growing 4% a year. Right now, Melbourne Airport wants to increase its flight emissions by around 60%, creating an extra 160 million tonnes out to 2046, 50 times more than they admit from their proposed third runway. The Melbourne-Sydney flight path is the second most emissions intensive by kilometre on the planet. Inside these doors, right now, the aviation industry meets to expand its footprint.
Shame.
At the same time, the world is meeting at COP27 because rapid emissions reductions are necessary. At the same time, the uncompromised science tells us that for an acceptable probability of avoiding climate chaos, we can burn no more carbon.
No more.
We need to stop burning carbon yesterday. ASAP, the quicker the better. That's for an acceptable probability of avoiding climate chaos, not a 1 in 3 chance or a 50-50 chance of avoiding it. So what's the IATA's emissions reduction response to our climate predicament? It's this net zero 2050 flight path. It's ongoing emissions out to 2050 and beyond. It's a climate crash flight path. According to the IPCC, the net zero 2050 destination has a less than 50% chance of a safe landing, as low as a 1 in 3 chance of preventing 1.5 degrees of warming that the world has said we must avoid. Are our governments acknowledging this risk? Are our media reporting this risk? Would you get on a plane that was more than likely to crash? For an industry that prides itself on safety, net zero 2050 is an insanely risky trajectory. But even the insanely inadequate emissions reductions in the net zero 2050 plan, they're massively overstated. Some are supposed to come from the use of alternative fuels, which can't replace jet diesel across the global fleet for decades, if ever. And they won't be emissions free even then. They only work in a blend with fossil jet fuel. They still create non-CO2 emissions, including contrails that are twice as warming as CO2 alone. And in alternative fuels, deducting the carbon already in the fuel stock doesn't make them emissions free. So they're not quote unquote sustainable aviation fuels. The net zero 2050 emissions reductions are also supposed to come from offsetting flight emissions against carbon drawdown. But massive carbon drawdown is needed to cool an already disastrously hot planet. So stealing for offsetting is theft, is a crime. And yes, thankfully renewables powered short-haul electric flight may be possible in the years to come, but that doesn't excuse ongoing emissions in the meantime. Oh yes, and we're meant to believe that other ongoing aviation emissions will be captured and buried at some time in the future when how to do that is invented. The industry's pathway is seriously dangerous greenwash. IATA can't be emissions free by 2030 or 2050, and its flight path won't prevent 2 degrees of warming. But look who's on board this climate crash flight path. Look who's signed up for net zero 2050. Let's call them out. Alongside IATA, there's Qantas, there's Virgin Australia, there's your industry's super fund through Melbourne Airport shareholder IFM Investors. There's the taxpayer-funded Future Fund, another Melbourne Airport shareholder. There's our Victorian government, and there's our federal government with its recent support for the so-called sustainable aviation industry in Australia. And they want us to join them.
Shame! It's all greenwash.
To cut aviation emissions, we've got to get to the emergency exit. Massive and rapid reductions in flight demand are the only way to get to a safer destination. IATA, the industry, until it's emissions free, has got to massively cut slots, cut flight numbers, or we fry. Not fly, fry. Staying on the ground until flying is emissions free, it's a massive challenge. Yes, it's going to be difficult, but it'll be far, far easier than struggling to survive climate chaos and collapsing life support systems. We can make rail travel better and faster if we want. We can voluntarily restrain ourselves if we want. We can choose to regulate flight reductions if we want to. But are our leaders actually up for the challenge? Will they really continue to prioritise saving an inequitable economy, or anything else for that matter, over saving our life support systems? Will they really choose to sign, as UN Secretary General Guterres warned recently, a collective suicide pact? Well, we're here today because we won't get on a plane that's more than likely to crash. We won't get on the IATA Net Zero 2050 climate crash flight path. Let's demand what's necessary. Do we want renewables electrified fast rail? Yes.
Yes.
Do we want emission-free aviation? Yes.
Yes.
Do we want fewer IATA flights? Yes.
Yes.
Do we want a third runway at Tullamarine? No. Do we want aviation fuel tax like other transport? Yes. Do we want frequent flyers tax? Yes. Do we want a safe climate? Yes.
When do we want it?
Now! What do we want? Climate justice! When do we want it?
Now!
Extinction!
Rebellion!
Extinction!
Rebellion!
Extinction!
Rebellion!
Drop the slots.
IATA are meeting to greenwash us that they can carry on expanding aviation by 4% a year by swapping slots with each other at international airports and just carrying on business as usual. But what that means is emissions as usual. There's no such thing as sustainable aviation fuels. There are alternative aviation fuels which could possibly cause world hunger if we give away our agricultural land to grow crops so we can keep the very privileged in the air. But that's not what we want. There's a climate crisis. We can't go about doing something like that. We can't give a free kick to the aviation industry who want to carry on emitting while the rest of the world tries to reduce emissions. and do something about the climate emergency. So there are no free rides. Melbourne Airport can't have a free ride. The Jet Council that the government have set up is not a solution if they go about trying to create a sustainable aviation fuel industry, because that's a colonial aviation fuel industry. Make no mistake, massive taxpayer subsidies are required, and they will go right into the poorest market and try to create fuels which those countries need that land for growing crops. There's going to be a food and hunger crisis because of the climate emergency. Make no mistake, it's here already, and we cannot afford to go about pandering to an industry like aviation. We need to take a stand here in Melbourne, and we need them to stop the slots. We've got a climate crisis.
Stop the slots!
Climate crisis.
Stop the slots!
Climate crisis.
Stop the slots!